The new guy started a few weeks back, David or something. He wasn't like the other guys in the office, you know? Suit and tie, always on his phone. Seemed too important for the rest of us. Then, one day at the coffee machine, he actually smiled at me. Not some polite little smile, I mean a real one. Made me feel all fluttery inside, which is ridiculous at my age. Those after-work drinks started innocently enough. A few of us heading to the bar across the street, blowing off steam. But pretty soon, it was just me and David. He'd talk about his big plans, stuff that went way over my head. Made me feel, well, not boring for once. It felt good to be listened to, really listened to. It started to get real late. We shouldn't have, but those emails after everyone else left, they weren't about spreadsheets anymore. Stuff about feeling stuck, about my life, things I hadn't even said out loud to myself. He got it, you know? No one's ever gotten me like that. Well, except maybe Michael, way back when. The thing is, Michael stopped getting me a long time ago. One day, he said some dumb thing about my earrings, how they brought out my eyes. I felt myself blush. Stupid, since I'm old enough to be his mom. But it had been forever since anyone made me feel like that. Michael never noticed a damn thing. New earrings, new haircut, it didn't matter. The office felt different, little touches in the break room, his hand on my shoulder when we went over reports. Wrong. I knew it was wrong, but it felt so damn good. He looked at me like I was the only woman in the world, like I actually mattered. Made me hate coming home to the same old routine, the kids with their noses in their phones, Michael snoring in front of the TV. It was like I was two people. The sensible Sarah who made dinner and did laundry, and this other Sarah, the one who lit up when David looked her way. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. Okay, so then the whole clothes thing started. Stupid, really, but I found myself digging through my closet, looking for that one skirt that made me feel kinda cute. Lipstick too, hadn't worn that in years. In the bathroom, it took me ages to figure out how to put it on, felt like a teenager all over again. I started fixing my hair in the mornings instead of just pulling it back. All for him. Pathetic, right? But he noticed. The way he looked at me, it made me feel like I was 20 again, not some faded mom in sensible shoes. We'd gripe over those terrible office lunches. He'd complain about his wife, how they never talked anymore, how she didn't understand him. Dumb stuff, but it made me feel all sympathetic, you know? Like, here's this successful guy, and even he had problems. I started opening up about Michael, how he was basically a stranger in his own house, always on the road with his trucking job. Felt safer complaining about my life with David rather than actually looking at the mess it had become. Before I knew it, we were spilling our guts to each other. Dangerous territory, looking back, but it felt good to have someone actually listen to me. The office Christmas party was a blur. Too much cheap wine, too many people saying dumb stuff. Everyone was letting loose, trying to forget it was back to the grindstone come Monday. I found myself cornered by David in the supply closet of all places. He was close, saying all those things, about how I deserved better, how he wished things were different. Next thing I knew, we were kissing. It was stupid, reckless, and it felt so damn good. Like someone had finally flipped a switch inside me I'd forgotten even existed. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Michael was snoring beside me, and I was wide awake, feeling like I'd split in two. Guilty Sarah, the good wife, and crazy Sarah, the one who felt alive again after God knows how long. It was a mess swirling in my head, the guilt gnawing at me even while I craved the way David looked at me, a way Michael hadn't in ages. After that, it all went downhill fast. Lunch wasn't lunch anymore. We started sneaking off to some crappy motel during the day. It was exciting, thrilling, and I was sinking deeper and deeper. Started making excuses to not come home, saying I had to work late or grab drinks with the girls. Michael, bless his heart, never suspected a thing. It got to where I couldn't even stand being at home anymore. Everything there felt dull and lifeless. The thing is, I should have known I was caught the moment Michael saw me with that new lipstick on. He even grinned, said, "Looking good there, Sarah." Feeling fancy, should have seen the alarm bells, but I was too caught up in my stupid fantasies with David to notice. That pang of guilt, That feeling that I was betraying everyone I cared about, I shoved it down deep. David had a way of making my doubts disappear, like magic. He'd whisper in those motels that Michael didn't appreciate me, that I deserved someone better. It was like a drug, the way he made me feel wanted again. Soon, the only thing I could think about was getting away, being with David. Everything Michael did started bugging me. The way he slurped his soup, the dumb dad jokes he made. It was like I couldn't even stand him anymore after all those years together. Wasn't fair to Michael, not at all, but I couldn't help it. I turned into someone I hardly recognized. The kids started noticing, too. Emily, bless her dramatic teenage heart, started throwing a fit every time she wanted to borrow my makeup, as if I had any clue how to use the stuff anymore. I snapped at her, shouted some nonsense about how she was too young, that she needed to focus on school. She stared back at me with this hurt look that twisted something inside me. The guilt would creep in for those few minutes, and then just fade away the moment David texted. Then wouldn't even look at me anymore, always with those damn headphones on. Jake looked confused, like he couldn't figure out who this angry woman was who used to be his mom. I ruined everything. I hated the person I'd become, the liar, the selfish coward, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I was stuck in some kind of twisted tornado, and I couldn't find a way out. Ben retreated into his room. I'd hear music blasting, those video game sound effects. He didn't want anything to do with me, and honestly, I didn't blame him. Some days, I didn't want anything to do with myself either. David painted these perfect little pictures of what it could be like with him. Trips to the beach, fancy dinners, no screaming teenagers or dirty laundry. It was all lies, but man, those lies sounded good when your life looks like a pile of ashes. One night, Jake caught me sneaking in. He was up late, studying or whatever, and I must have looked a mess hair crazy, makeup smeared. The look on his face was like he'd seen a ghost. I couldn't take it, snapped at him to mind his own business, and slammed my bedroom door. It was like all the guilt I'd been pushing down turned to poison, and I just lashed out at the closest person to me. Michael, bless his clueless heart, decided to be all romantic. Planned a whole surprise weekend at that bed and breakfast by the lake. Just like old times, he said with this hopeful look. I felt sick to my stomach faking a migraine, lying through my teeth as he scrambled for the Tylenol. Sent him off with a kiss on the cheek and a promise to be better by Monday. As soon as the truck rumbled down the driveway, I was texting David. That was when he brought it up, the idea of leaving Michael. Start over. Just you and me, he said. It'll be like a vacation that never ends. The excitement, the pure, stupid excitement, I felt was as scary as it was tempting. My whole mind screamed that it was crazy, that I'd ruin everything, but a little voice whispered, why not? I was already so far gone, wasn't I? The answer, the stupid, terrible answer was yes. Hands were shaking so bad I could barely write. Scrawled the note on a napkin. All kinds of dumb excuses about needing time to think, needing space lies, all lies. Stuck it to the fridge with a magnet and grabbed my overnight bag. That bag I'd started keeping in the trunk of my car, packed with clothes, makeup, some cash I'd stashed away. Felt like a criminal, but also free, in a twisted, sick kind of way. Didn't even look back at the house. Couldn't look at the kids. Knew Emily would be home from school soon. Jake probably holed up in his room like Ben. The guilt was a monster clawing at my insides, but that giddy feeling, that lightness, kept me walking right out the front door. That damned feeling that everything would be perfect now, once I was with David. He was my escape, my solution. Of course, it was Emily who found the shrieking, crying, the whole hysterical teenager routine. Honestly, sometimes I forgot how young she still was. Ben, ever the quiet one, just looked at her with these sad eyes. My heart shattered a little more, but the twisted, desperate part of me was already picturing a life without snotty tissues and slammed doors. Michael came home to chaos. Emily shoving the napkin in his face, Jake trying to calm her down. I imagine his tired, confused eyes scanning those few pathetic lines I wrote. That part of me, the tiny shred that still felt like a real person, hoped he'd cry, break down, beg me to come back. Instead, his face went hard, jaw clenched. The yelling started soon after. Not at the kids, not at first. He was out in the yard, roaring into his phone, voice shaking with a fury that scared even me. My turn next. Sarah the traitor, Sarah the coward. He didn't plead, not once. Just raged, called me names I never thought he even knew. The kids huddled on the couch, sobbing now. I wasn't their mom anymore. I was the monster that broke their world. When I finally got to David's, my bags felt like they weighed a ton. He answered the door, that dazzling smile already in place, until he saw the suitcase. Saw the tear stains and my messed up mascara. That smile slipped a little, replaced by a flash of worry, maybe even a flicker of annoyance. That was the first sign I wasn't walking into paradise. That was when it started to dawn on me that maybe, just maybe, I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The cracks showed fast in my perfect little fantasy world. David's apartment was messy, clothes everywhere, takeout containers stinking up the place. Just a bachelor pad, he'd say with that smile, but the smile was getting weaker by the day. He started working late, then coming home smelling of women's perfume with lipstick smudged on his collar. Cliché, I know, but damn if it didn't hurt. When I'd confront him, he'd turn it back on me. I wasn't being supportive enough, wasn't making enough of an effort to fit into his lifestyle. The truth was as clear as the mascara streaks on my tear-stained face. I was a liability now, not some exciting secret. But I was trapped. There was nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Clung to his lies like a lifeline, because what else did I have? Michael got a good lawyer. Sharp, expensive kind I saw on TV shows. Served me those divorce papers quick as a whiplash. The letter was all cold, legal words I barely understood, but the message was clear. He wanted me gone, out of his and the kids' lives for good. Sarah the homewrecker, my own lawyer, some overworked woman with tired eyes, suggested I fight it. Fight for custody, try to rebuild my case. Like that was even possible. I laughed, this bitter, broken sound that startled even myself. Tried calling the kids. Emily hung up the second she heard my voice. Jake didn't even pick up. Then, I don't even know if he got my texts. My own children, and they were strangers now. The realization hit me like a truck. This wasn't a temporary bump in the road. This was the rest of my life. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone of theirs, I'd miss it all. Because I chose to be selfish. Because I was dumb enough to believe in fairy tales spun by a lying conman. The news got out. Small towns are like that. Everyone whispers. Everyone judges. Lost my job at the office, of course. Used to make eye contact with the girls I'd have drinks with, but they'd look away, pretend I didn't exist. The stares in the grocery store, the way people muttered behind my back. It was like I was wearing a big scarlet letter A for adulterer. I deserved it, every bit of it. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and it was all the same miserable blur. David's affection was like crumbs tossed to a starving dog, just enough to keep me around, but never enough to feel well, loved, or even wanted. Late nights became his norm, always with some vague excuse about deals and big opportunities. I knew it was a lie. The smell of cheap perfume and liquor that clung to him told the real story. But what could I say? I was stuck, a broken toy he hadn't quite gotten tired of yet. The money, what little I had, started running out. Bills piled up on the kitchen table, those scary red late notice stamps glaring at me. David would wave them off, all bluster and promises of big payouts coming soon. I started to believe less and less of what he said. Hope was a dangerous thing, and I was running on empty. The earring was the final straw. Cheap, costume jewelry thing, a dangling rhinestone that wasn't even close to my style. Laying right there on the bedroom floor, mocking me, the rage bubbled up so fast it choked me. Not heartbreak, not anymore. It was fury at myself for being such a damn fool, and this desperate surge of needing to do something, anything. When David got home that night, reeking of some dive bar and women's perfume, I didn't cry, didn't beg like I usually did. I shoved that earring in his face and told him to get out. His eyes widened in surprise, probably shocked that the pathetic woman he'd been using still had a backbone left. He stammered out some pathetic excuse, grabbed a few things, and slammed the door. Relief washed over me, then a crushing wave of loneliness. So much for the happy ending he'd promised. David didn't leave quietly. We screamed at each other. Nasty words I never thought I'd say spewing out. His charming mask fell away, replaced by a sneer. He wasn't some ambitious businessman. He was a cheap crook with nothing but lies to offer. Said I was just a sad, middle-aged woman desperate for attention, that the affair was my fault for being so pathetic. Every word cut deeper, but a part of me knew he was right. I was pathetic. I deserved this, deserved to be alone. My old enemy, the liquor cabinet, started calling my name. Figured a few drinks would numb the pain, shut off the voices in my head telling me what a worthless piece of trash I was. One drink turned into three, then the whole damn bottle was gone. My fingers fumbled with Michael's number. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since that awful, rage-filled phone call. The voicemail beep seemed to echo through the empty apartment. I didn't have a speech prepared, nothing but sobs and stuttered apologies. Told him I was sorry, I messed up, I was an idiot. Every pathetic word I could think of. Pitiful, I know. Begging for forgiveness I didn't deserve. The pills were next, rattling in the orange bottle on the counter. Just end it all, that voice whispered. Make the pain stop. I choked down a handful, the bitter taste mixing with the tears. The world was getting fuzzy, which was probably a good thing. I just wanted to sleep, to never wake up. The banging on the door startled me, mumbled something about going away, but it got louder, more frantic. Then came the sirens, the flashing lights. Turned out, concerned neighbors heard the screaming match with David. Called the cops. So not only was I a failure, I was now a public spectacle. The police hauled me out in my pajamas, mumbling and half delirious. The paramedics poked and prodded, forcing some nasty liquid down my throat. In the harsh lights of the ambulance, amidst the worried faces of strangers, I felt it all, the shame, the regret, the utter and complete emptiness. I'd hit rock bottom, and there was nowhere left to fall. The hospital was worse than I imagined. Harsh white walls, the smell of disinfectant, it made me sick all over again. Got released after a day, stomach pumped, lectures from the doctors, the whole routine. They sent me home with a warning and a list of therapists I'd never be able to afford. Back in the apartment, the silence was deafening. David's things were gone, of course. Howard took off in the dead of night, probably with the last bit of cash I had hidden away. His parting gift, I guess. Found an empty liquor bottle by the couch, a reminder of my spectacular meltdown. I wanted to throw it against the wall, shatter it in 1,000 pieces, but I didn't even have the energy for that. My phone buzzed, figured it was another concerned neighbor. It was my lawyer, voice tight with what she must have thought was sympathy. Michael got sole custody. The judge looked at my little suicide stunt and decided I was an unfit parent. Surprise, surprise. Visitation was limited to a few supervised hours a month. If I jumped through enough hoops and proved I wasn't a complete danger to myself or others. Days turned into a blur of sleeping and not sleeping, staring at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly. My phone rang constantly. Those blocked numbers were likely bill collectors, people I owed money to. Didn't answer. Couldn't face another reminder of my failures. My body ached, my head throbbed, but the worst pain was inside, a hollowness that gnawed at me. Then the eviction notice came, shoved under the door like garbage. Failure to pay, it said in those official, uncaring letters. I didn't have a dime to my name, and who'd rent to a woman like me? The news reports would precede me, the stories whispered behind my back. Sarah the homewrecker, Sarah the loser, there was truly nowhere to go. The old neighborhood felt like a different planet. Nice houses, trimmed lawns, minivans parked in the driveways. Families living normal lives, the kind of life I threw away. On autopilot, I stopped in front of my old house. Our house. The lights were off, new owners must be out of town or something. Boldness born out of desperation, I guess. Got out of the car, walked up to the porch in a daze. Through the living room window, I saw it all. A different couch, a framed picture on the mantelpiece that definitely wasn't mine. Family photos, a smiling woman with 2 boys and a girl. The kids I abandoned. Jake looked almost like a man now. Emily's hair was longer, and Ben. Ben wasn't hiding behind video games anymore. They looked happy, healthy. That was the worst part. My knees gave out, just sat there on the front steps, sobbing like an idiot. The rain started, soft at first, then pounding down. Didn't even care. It mirrored the storm inside me, the realization that this was on me. All of it. Got back in the car, my one pathetic possession, and just drove. No destination, no plan. Ended up sleeping in a Walmart parking lot, the rain drumming on the roof lulling me into a fitful sleep filled with nightmares and whispers of regret. When the dawn broke, gray and bleak like everything else in my life, I knew I'd reached the end of the line. There was nowhere else to fall. News spreads like wildfire in small towns. They all knew what I'd done, who I'd become. Ended up cleaning those same sleazy motel rooms I'd snuck around in with David. Cruel irony, the universe laughing in my face. Sometimes I see the kids. Catch glimpses around town. Jake looks so much like his father, it's like a punch to the gut every time. Emily walks by like I'm a stranger, which I suppose I am. Ben still has those headphones on, shutting out the world, and the mother who ruined everything for him. Life's become this gray blur. I exist, but barely. Clean other people's messes, watch other families live the life I shattered. They whisper about me in the grocery store, the judgment clear in their eyes. They call it a cautionary tale, parents telling their kids, see what happens when you stray. I'm the monster in the shadows now, the warning of what not to become. And the worst part? The day started like all others. A stale cup of coffee, the silent clink of my wedding band against the bathroom sink as I splashed water onto my face. Each movement felt automatic, a play I'd rehearsed to the point of numbness. He'd be slumped at the kitchen table, scrolling through whatever sports scores filled his time these days. I'd kiss his cheek with a precision that betrayed any lingering warmth, and then we'd launch into the motions of our separate lives. But today, something snapped in me as I packed a bland salad for lunch, the same one every Wednesday. He let out a low grunt of dissatisfaction at something on his screen. You know, I said louder than intended, there was a time you used to look up when I walked in the room. He mumbled a half-hearted apology, barely glancing over. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes, a familiar mix of anger and ridiculous, pathetic hope that he'd actually care. The words slipped out before I could stop them, sharp and bitter like the I hadn't finished. Get better in bed or I'm cheating. Consider this your warning. As soon as it left my mouth, I wanted to snatch the threat back. It was meant as a jab, a desperate cry for attention, not a real ultimatum. But I couldn't admit it, so I turned a trembling hand into a nonchalant shrug and went back to my salad. It was ridiculous. I would never actually cheat on him, would I? That stupid question became my unwelcome companion for the rest of the day. With every meaningless email at work and every half-hearted interaction with a coworker, I'd think, could I? Would I? What would it even be like? I tried to push it away, to focus on the mundane tasks that used to ground me. But by the time I walked back through the door that evening, the threat echoed with every step. And there was something different. A pair of running shoes he never wore kicked off haphazardly, not neatly lined up as usual. On the kitchen counter, a crumpled receipt from a florist. My pulse quickened. Flowers? He'd never done spontaneous flowers, especially not the cheap grocery store kind. The threat turned to a lump in my throat. It wasn't playful anymore. It was a dare, a question I hadn't meant to ask and I might soon have to answer. And for all the bravado, the answer terrified me. I'd find the proof, wouldn't I? That's how these things always start, isn't it? That night, sleep was an elusive enemy. Every creak of the house was a footstep. Every shadow cast by the streetlights transformed into a lurking figure outside the bedroom window. He snored softly beside me, oblivious to the storm raging inside my head. The next morning, armed with the brittle resolve of the sleepless, I slid a small notebook into my purse. It felt absurd, spy-like, but the simple act of preparing focused my fear into a twisted kind of productivity. My movements through the house took on a new edge. It wasn't just his coffee I prepared, it was evidence I gathered. The time on the coffee maker, the specific mug he chose, logging it all with a shaking hand. I observed his calls with excruciating detail. How long did he linger on the phone after hanging up? Was the friendly tone with Sarah from accounting a little too friendly? Ridiculous, paranoid thoughts. Yet I couldn't stop. "You're being a bit intense, you know," he'd said once, and I'd shrugged it off with a forced laugh. Now, every interaction felt contaminated with suspicion. The half-hearted kisses, the casual questions about my day. Were they attempts to lull me into complacency, or was I just losing my grip on sanity? This couldn't go on. I needed something, a shred of proof, anything to validate this madness. That's how I found myself doing the unthinkable, going through his phone while he showered. Nothing blatant, no salacious texts or suspicious photos. Just a series of emails with the upcoming fundraiser. Why was my heart pounding like a rabbit caught underfoot? My own name barely surfaced in his messages. The guilt washed over me in waves, yet alongside it was a perverse thrill. I was in the game now, playing dirty just like I imagined he was. I started inventing excuses to be out late, mirroring his unexplained absences. Phone calls at odd hours where I let the line go dead if he answered. Juvenile power play, but damn it, it felt good. Then the near miss. A crumpled sweater, balled up in the laundry hamper, reeked of a perfume that wasn't mine. This was it. I confronted him, voice dripping with accusatory calm. Turns out the sweater belonged to a coworker he'd given a ride to when her car broke down. He seemed more exasperated than anything else. I couldn't decide if I was more furious at being wrong or terrified of being right. Because now it was clear, my initial anger at our lackluster sex life had warped into something else entirely. It was about feeling neglected, invisible. The hunt for an affair was as much about finding proof of my own worth as it was about his betrayal. And that scared me more than anything he might find in someone else's bed. I needed backup. This was getting too big for one deranged woman to handle. My sister, bless her messy heart, was the obvious choice. She'd always been a magnet for drama, and the potential for a cheating scandal was exactly the spice her humdrum suburban life was missing. Fueled by cheap wine and whispered theories, we scoured the internet for telltale signs. Every vague Reddit post about husbands acting off became gospel. I started cataloging the women around him, judging them with venomous scrutiny. Was it Linda in HR, with her artificially bright laugh? Melissa the neighbor always conveniently jogging past when he was mowing the lawn? Were they all in on some grand conspiracy laughing at the pathetic, paranoid wife? The world warped around my obsession. Every delayed text from him, every lingering hug with an old friend in the grocery aisle, it all became fuel for the bonfire blazing inside me. My own life began to fray. I snapped at my coworkers, neglected basic chores. Everything was secondary to the investigation. Yet for all my furious searching, there was nothing solid. Just hints, maybe patterns, and the unshakable conviction that something was deeply wrong. I hatched a plan. I'd pop home early from work one day, catch him unprepared. But when I eased into the driveway, there was no strange car, no muffled sounds of betrayal from the bedroom. What I found instead was far more confusing. He was sitting on the back porch, phone in hand, staring out into the yard with a haunted look I'd never seen before. That night's confrontation was the worst yet. My accusations grew wilder, less rooted in reality and more in the toxic stew I'd been brewing in my own head. He went from confused to defensive to downright frightened. "Are you losing it?" he snapped, and the question sent a chill through me. Was I? The tables had turned. Was he questioning my sanity, gaslighting me like some dime store thriller villain? Later, collapsed on the couch, defeated and doubting everything, a flicker caught my eye. His phone, carelessly abandoned on the side table. Then it was gone, snatched up before I could get a better look. He'd been hiding it. All those suspicious pauses, those muttered conversations he'd cut short at my approach. A cold sort of anxiety gripped me. He was hiding something, and if it wasn't an affair, my worst nightmare was coming true. The thing he was hiding was far, far worse. There was only one line left to cross, one rule I hadn't allowed myself to break. I knew where he kept a spare key to his office, knew his computer password was a pathetic variation of his dog's name. This wasn't me. Or rather, this was exactly the person I was becoming. Desperate, pathetic, and unrecognizable even to myself. Yet as my fingers tapped out that password, I didn't feel shame. Only a white-hot surge of vindictive anticipation. He'd made this monster, hadn't he? The first wave of emails was nothing suspicious. Work things, spam, the predictable mundanity of the online world. Then I hit on a folder labeled Project Sunflower. Curiosity gnawed at me. It wasn't the name that was odd, innocuous as it was, but the fact that he'd bothered making a special folder at all. Inside, nothing earth-shattering. Plans for some charity event, it seemed. Yet peppered throughout the bland budget spreadsheets were messages he'd exchanged with Rebecca. The tone was friendly, maybe a tad warmer than strictly professional. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the texts were infuriatingly vague. Planning meetings, jokes about a difficult client. Was I conjuring a specter from wisps of harmless chatter? But there it was, in black and white, evidence of something. The confrontation that followed was less an explosion and more a slow-motion car wreck. I couldn't bring myself to accuse him directly, but circled the truth like a wounded animal. He seemed genuinely baffled for a while, which made it worse. Was I really this delusional? What's going on with you? He asked, his voice laced with a weariness that was more cutting than anger. And that's when it all spilled out. The gnawing dissatisfaction, the feeling like a ghost in my own life, the suspicion festering like poison inside me. It had nothing to do with Becca and everything to do with us. Somehow that made the fight messier. He threw back his own accusations, my coldness, the way I'd always been quick to pick him apart. We orbited each other, hurling bitter truths like weapons. It was brutal, more honest than we'd been in years. But honesty of this kind was destructive. When it finally, mercifully, ended, there were no answers, only a desolate kind of truce. Maybe we'd both said unforgivable things. Maybe this was the end, or maybe just a terrible new beginning. Either way, it was a hollow victory. That damn work crisis, the one I initially saw as a blessed distraction, now only served as further torment. During rushed phone calls about a looming deadline, I'd imagine them together. Becca beside him as he hammered out solutions. A conspiratorial smile on her face. The seed of doubt once planted sprouted twisted branches within me, strangling every attempt at normalcy. My obsession had changed shape, but it was as strong as ever. Only now it was fueled by a deeper, existential kind of fear. Who was I without this fight? This investigation to give my life a twisted sort of purpose. It could have happened anywhere, but of course the reveal came in the most mundane of places. The grocery store checkout line. Glancing idly at the rack of trashy magazines, a familiar name jolted me. Rebecca, featured in a local Women in Business spotlight. My heart stuttered as I took in the photo. Not some bombshell, but a woman close to my age, hair pulled back in a sensible ponytail. Her smile pleasant yet unremarkable. It was her title that made my knees go weak. Project director at his company. Suddenly all those vague business texts, his late-night work sessions, fell into a sickeningly clear pattern. The obsession flared back to life, hotter and uglier than before. Becca. Now she had a face, a name, a life I could pick apart with ruthless fascination. My hands shook as I fumbled with my credit card, my mind already on fire with a million questions. Was she the cliché, young, ambitious, using her flirtation to climb the ladder? Or was it different, something twisted and real? Her social media profile was my new Bible. Every photo dissected, even innocuous ones with her dog or a plate of healthy-looking food became sinister. She went to the same yoga studio I did. Had they passed each other? Exchanged smiles I knew must have held secret contempt. I started dressing more like her, bought the same brand of tea I noticed on her kitchen counter in a carefully staged Instagram post. Was it an attempt to get inside her head? Or was I slowly losing my own identity in this desperate chase for answers? I knew I was becoming unhinged. Friends' concerned comments went ignored. My work started to suffer. Yet with each dubious late-night meeting he claimed to have, with every glance I imagined him giving Becca that was meant for me, the need to know, to confirm my suspicions gnawed away at me. The plan came together in a fevered dream of frustration. I'd attend the charity fundraiser Project Sunflower was a part of. I'd find her, confront her, shame her. The details were blurry. I just needed to see, to confirm with my own eyes the truth I already knew in my poisoned heart. There were moments, brief flickers of clarity, when I wanted to scream. I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and see a stranger staring back, gaunt and wild-eyed. What the hell was I doing? What was I becoming? The thought terrified me. And yet, somehow, it also thrilled me. I was playing a dangerous game, and damn it, I was determined to win, no matter what monstrous version of myself was left at the end. The world around me began to crumble in slow motion. A botched meeting where I rambled and fumbled through my presentation led to a curt call from my boss, concern laced with pointed threats. My sister, once my gleeful co-conspirator, now avoided my increasingly frantic calls. Even my mother, usually so quick to defend my every quirk, offered only strained platitudes and worried frowns. I was unraveling, and it was frighteningly visible to everyone but myself, yet the obsession thrummed on. The charity event was 2 agonizing weeks away. 2 weeks to plan my grand confrontation, to gather the final damning bits of evidence. Even as everything else fell apart, this perverse mission kept me tethered to a semblance of control. The night of the fundraiser, as I forced myself into a dress that hung loosely from my neglected body, I no longer imagined a dramatic public unmasking. What would I even say to Becca? It was clear my own delusion had painted her as the villain. Still, I went, drawn by a morbid fascination greater than any remaining sense of righteousness. I found her easily. Standing with a group of women, she was just as I'd pictured, unremarkable yet strangely assured. A surge of something almost like pity washed over me. Before I could overthink it, I approached, my voice hoarse when I introduced myself. Her eyes widened, but not in the guilty recognition I'd anticipated. Instead, she looked concerned. "It's about your husband, isn't it? There's been something off with him lately." The world tilted on its axis. As she spoke, her words slow and careful as if talking to someone fragile. A horrifying reality pieced itself together. His distracted air, the secret of calls, and they had nothing to do with romance. There was another secret, and I'd missed it entirely. What followed was a blur. A hastily excused exit, a long numb drive home, and a gut-wrenching confrontation the likes of which we'd never had. It wasn't about blame this time. It was about laying bare the ugly truth of our neglect, the way we'd both sought escape. Him in whatever work-related darkness he'd stumbled into, and me in my destructive pursuit of a ghost. If I hadn't been so focused on finding the wrong kind of monster. My voice trailed off, weighted with a bitterness that had nothing to do with him. He didn't offer excuses, only a weary acknowledgement of his own failures. It was a cold comfort. There was still so much we didn't know, so many unspoken accusations that hung heavy between us. Yet something fundamental had shifted. In the harsh light of dawn, we sat across the kitchen table, the untouched coffee between us a symbol of our broken routine. I could walk away, should walk away. There might be too much poison in the well now, too much irreparable damage. Yet a strange flicker of hope stirred in me. We'd seen each other at our worst, stripped bare of all pretense. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only place a real rebuild could even begin. In the aftermath of our brutal honesty, the silence of the house became unbearable. Each ticking clock mocked the absurdity of the past months. I existed in a state of jittery numbness, sleep and food reduced to unwelcome necessities. Without the convenient villain of an affair to focus on, my mind turned into a panicked ferret gnawing at every past interaction with him. Those late nights at the office, the curt phone calls, even the misplaced receipts. They painted a new, far more chilling picture. Had I been willfully ignorant of something too terrible to even consider? The thought made me physically ill. Driven by manic desperation, I revisited my trove of evidence. But now, instead of searching for signs of infidelity, I hunted for proof of what exactly? I didn't know. Every email was scrutinized, every note in his planner holding the potential to shatter the world further. It came in the form of a memory, something so insignificant I hadn't even bothered writing it in my notebook. A conversation months ago, where he mentioned an old college buddy needing help, and his tone was a strange mix of frustration and obligation. Could it be that simple? Gambling debts. A substance abuse problem he'd foolishly taken on himself? It seemed disappointingly mundane. Yet the possibility sank icy talons into me. My digging became frenzied. Phone records were dissected. Calls placed to numbers I didn't recognize. Lingering late-night texts when he claimed to be working. I reached out to my sister, my shame almost as great as my need for help. His colleagues were watched, their casual interactions interpreted through a twisted lens of suspicion. It was pathetic, and yet I couldn't stop. The discovery came on a rainy Wednesday, an email tucked in a forgotten folder marked as drafts. It wasn't written to me, and it wasn't signed by him. It was addressed to an unfamiliar name and was a mixture of apology and desperation. The final lines, though, were enough to make my blood freeze. It was a mistake. No one can find out. Please, give me more time to get the money. His carefully constructed image shattered in an instant. It was something financial, something shameful, and likely something illegal. The possibilities swirled around me, dizzying and terrible. That night's confrontation was nothing like I imagined. Gone was the hysterical, accusatory wife. I was a chilling mirror of his own desperation, laying out the proof with a composure that masked the storm of disgust and betrayal raging within. Watching him crumble was a dark kind of satisfaction tinged with a terror I couldn't yet acknowledge. His explanation was almost anticlimactic. A foolish investment gone wrong, a snowball of debt and bad decisions he'd stupidly thought he could handle on his own. It tied back to that half-remembered conversation about helping a friend. The friend was himself. There was no grand criminal conspiracy, only weakness and a misguided sense of loyalty. It was far more pathetic, yet also far more dangerous for both of us. In the aftermath of his confession, I should have felt triumphant. The mystery was solved. The power shifted. Yet all I felt was a bone-deep weariness and a disgust that didn't just encompass him, but poisoned my own reflection in the mirror. His crime wasn't monstrous, but in the pursuit of exposing it, I had become the monster. There were options. I could ruin him. A few well-placed calls, some strategically leaked information to the wrong people. It might not land him in jail, but it would shatter his career. The image he valued more than anything. It would be deserved, wouldn't it? Yet the thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. I could use this as leverage. With this knowledge, I held all the cards. He'd do anything to keep this quiet, wouldn't he? Perhaps this was my twisted chance to rebuild our marriage in my image. To demand the focus and devotion I craved, but he never freely gave. It was a tempting darkness that whispered to the wounded, bitter parts of me. In the end, I did none of those things. The decision came less from a place of morality and more from a sense of sheer exhaustion. I was so tired of the games, the endless suspicion, the twisting of everything between us into something ugly. Here's how this will go. My voice was cold, devoid of its usual accusatory fire. He tensed, waiting for me to either tear him apart or present a list of demands. Instead, I simply stated the facts. I would not expose him, at least not immediately. He would fix this, get himself out of this mess. We would figure out the financial fallout together. But if even a hint of this reached the outside world, all bets were off. There was no heartwarming resolution, no promise of starting fresh. Our marriage, whatever survived of it, would now be fueled by fear and obligation on his part. Perhaps resentment and a strange kind of pity on mine. Days later, I stood at the kitchen sink, mechanically washing the same mug I used every morning. The same mug he once joked had become an extension of my hand. He was in the study, making panicked calls, trying to untangle the mess he'd made. The scene was achingly familiar, and yet everything had changed. It started as a desire for change, a demand for attention. But had it ever truly been about him? This whole mess had illuminated the darkest parts of myself, the ugliness that lay dormant beneath my ordinary existence. The ultimatum I'd issued wasn't about better sex, it was about proving that I could still feel, that I could still make waves instead of passively drowning in a life that never felt fully like my own. Perhaps this is where the story should end with me walking away, reclaiming my life. Or maybe this is where it really begins. I sit down at my laptop, open a new document, and start to type. I warned him to get better in bed or I'm cheating. The words bring a bitter satisfaction. No, this isn't a story about a husband's betrayal or a wife's revenge. It's about the twisted path we take when we're desperate to feel something. Let me tell you about the night I discovered how deeply unoriginal men can be. Like, when it comes to cheating, do they get a discount if they all use the same playbook? Because Sarah, work, seriously, Jason, at least try to be a little creative with your lies. I stared at the backed up text messages, a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Sarah, work, sounds like someone a little too eager to climb the corporate ladder, if you know what I mean. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was I couldn't stop seeing it. Sarah, work flashing in my head every time I looked at Jason, every time he smiled at me. Which was often, because as far as he knew, his double life was safe. Okay, maybe I'm jumping ahead. It was just one text. Sure, it was a flirty text, saved on his phone like the damn crown jewels. But people get sloppy, right? Beth said it was probably nothing, but Beth also thinks I get jealous too easily. Which, rude, I'm not jealous, I'm observant. Meticulous even. A tiny suspicion had been planted, and now I couldn't stop watering it. Nights were the worst. Jason would be snoring softly beside me, smelling of his generic cologne that I'd always tolerated, not loved. Suddenly, it was the scent of betrayal. I'd lie there, trying to decipher muffled words as he mumbled work stuff in his sleep. Maybe he was saying, Sarah. Maybe they called each other, babe, and he just slipped up. Sleep? Forget it. I was practically a professional insomniac now. So, discreetly checking Jason's company directory felt like the next logical step, right? Sarah less, obviously. Did this man think I was an idiot? I chewed the inside of my cheek, tasting bitter disappointment. Was I overreacting? Then came the call, midnight, supposedly from his boss. I was half asleep, but his side of the conversation? Far too awake sounding. And then, the giggle. A woman's giggle, low and soft and distinctly not mine. The phone call ended abruptly, Jason with a mumbled, love you too, bye. Love you too? I stared at the ceiling, the darkness feeling suffocating. My mind was a hurricane of questions. Who the hell giggles with their boss? Who says, love you, on a work call? And most of all, who is he trying to fool? The next morning was fueled by caffeine and a cold sense of purpose. You know that scene in movies where the betrayed wife smashes things, or has a meltdown in the kitchen, surrounded by broken dishes and her mascara-streaked face. Yeah, not so much. There was something almost unnerving about how normal I felt. Jason, bless his lying heart, was none the wiser. He made me coffee, kissed my cheek, all while I sipped and smiled, my brain whirring with an icy calm. Okay. Maybe once he'd left, I threw the decorative pillow across the room with a satisfying curse. But just the one. I had work to do. Or, well, not my actual work. More like detective work. I may not have a trench coat, but hey, yoga pants are comfy. So, step 1. Operation Observe the Cheater. Jason's new habits were obvious. Hitting the gym at odd hours, ditching his baggy business casual for clothes that actually fit, and oh, the cologne. The guy smelled like the overly dramatic soundtrack of a daytime soap opera. And then there were the texts. Sarah. Work seemed to be his new favorite pastime. Their little conversations were so infuriatingly vague. Itches that needed scratching, drinks after work, inside jokes I wasn't privy to. Beth told me I was driving myself crazy, but hey, crazy can be resourceful. Which brings us to the plan. Beth, bless her loyal and slightly unhinged heart, wouldn't stand for this. We stake him out, she declared over spicy takeout. We find out who the hell this woman is. The tracker had revealed Jason's little detour spot, a trendy-looking bar near his office. A little, accidental, run-in, we figured, would give me all the confirmation I needed. I wish I could say I felt empowered driving there, ready to unleash some righteous fury. Instead, there was a lump in my throat, a mix of nausea and a desperate sort of curiosity. I parked a safe distance away, hands clammy on the steering wheel. This was so not my usual modus operandi. Wasn't I the responsible one? The predictable one? But hey, desperation makes you do weird things. And then I saw him. Through the window. Sitting at a corner table and grinning. Not across from some sleek bombshell, but Linda. Freaking Linda from accounting, with her sensible haircut and bland cardigan. A wave of heat swept through me. Not righteous fury this time, something more potent. Disappointment tinged with deep-seated anger. I could have stormed in there, made a scene. A part of me wanted to. But I didn't. I turned away from the window, walking back to my car with a strange determination hardening in my gut. The pathetic reality of the situation was hitting home. My husband, the guy the first built a life with, wasn't having some whirlwind romance. He was sneaking off for drinks with a woman whose most interesting feature was her expertise with spreadsheets. No grand confrontations, no public humiliation. He didn't deserve some epic showdown. He deserved proof, irrefutable, undeniable evidence of his boring little affair. And then I was going to make him truly sorry. The tracker app became my little poison. A few innocent-looking taps on my phone screen, and I knew exactly where Jason was at any given moment. At first, it was a tool for confirming those vague work commitments. The little hovering over a secluded park during lunch hour? Yeah, definitely not about budget spreadsheets. The evenings supposedly spent slaving away at the office? False. Turns out his side hustle involved upscale bars, not overtime. His carelessness was astounding. Seriously, the man was leaving a breadcrumb trail of evidence with the savvy of a cartoon villain. His phone, once password protected with military-grade encryption, was now carelessly unlocked. He wore the scent of some cheap, floral perfume like a badge of honor. And worst of all, he became predictable. His lies had a pattern now, and I knew it better than I knew the back of my hand. Then, a curveball. Enter the private investigator. Hiring him was a moment of what can only be described as calculated madness. Yes, I felt a pang of guilt at the thought of outright spying on my own husband. But as I scrolled through photos of Jason laughing with women who were definitely not from accounting, that guilt curdled into something cold and hard. Let's just say, he better be glad I believe in the legality of divorce, not the DIY options. Okay, so maybe I'm being a bit dramatic. But let me tell you, Beth was practically gleeful when I broke down and confessed the whole pie scheme. See, I told you this guy is scum, she cackled, pouring us another dangerously large glass of wine. Then, the call came. The pie had news, and with a sinking feeling, I hit speakerphone. It wasn't Linda, which, hey, maybe that was worse. The name he provided was Jessica. Young, vibrant, the type of intern who probably still giggled at memes. Which would suit Jason perfectly, as it turns out. A wave of nausea washed over me, mingled with a jolt of something fiercer. Not just anger now, but a strange, twisted determination. You want rage, the white-hot, blinding kind? That was me, holding my phone so tightly it might crack. Humiliation settled in, a gnawing ache in the pit of my stomach. And yet, beneath it all was a flicker of something else. Resolved, let's just say my pity party didn't last long. Jason wasn't getting off easy. It was time to switch tactics. Time for this, victim, to reclaim the game. You know those movies where the woman stares at her reflection, a flicker of something cold in her eyes, and then the epic makeover montage begins? Yeah, that wasn't me. My transformation was far more subtle, less triumphant girl power soundtrack, more calculated chess move. I became an observer, a gatherer of ammunition. Every interaction with Jason was dissected and filed away. Those vague excuses, the nervous lies. I cataloged them all, turning my hurt into a weaponized to-do list. Then came the bombshell, delivered by our not-so-friendly neighborhood tracker app. Jason, my predictable husband, wasn't just skulking around bars and parks. He was hitting up a shockingly high-end lingerie store. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. He wasn't buying generic birthday presents, he was outfitting somebody. And it sure as hell wasn't me. Now, I'm not one for public breakdowns unless strategically necessary. But there may have been a few muffled sobs into my pillow that night, followed by something new. A steely resolution that replaced the tears. I needed proof. Actual, undeniable, shove it in his lying face proof. And so began the most uncomfortable stakeout of my life. Tailing Jason felt like a poorly scripted spy movie. Me lurking behind oversized sunglasses, sipping terrible coffee, watching him emerge from a sleek office building and meet Jessica in a little cafe across the street. And they weren't discussing quarterly reports, let me tell you. The way they laughed, the way he touched her arm. It was like something inside me finally shattered into a million tiny pieces. But here's the twist. Alongside the pain, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. For months, I'd let myself be defined as the clueless wife, the boring other half. In some twisted way, Jason's betrayal was liberating. So yes, my world might be cracking, but instead of shrinking away, I did the opposite. A haircut, not some drastic change, but enough to shake off the invisible weight I'd been carrying. A few bold pieces added to my wardrobe, a splash of bright lipstick I'd never dared wear before. Beth, the ever-supportive instigator, dragged me out one night. Fake it till you make it, she claimed, buying me a drink with a ridiculously long name. Which, apparently, was just the fuel I needed. Enter Mike. We met at the bar, his smile easy, his eyes actually seeming to see me and not just through me. Our conversation was light, inconsequential, yet it ignited a spark I'd forgotten existed. Guilt pricked at me, sure. But beneath that, a thrill bubbled up. Turns out, being desired again feels pretty damn good. This knew me. She wasn't born of revenge, not entirely. Jason's affair had cracked something open, a side of myself I'd buried beneath sensible sweaters and predictable routines. Maybe I should be afraid of her, this bolder, less forgiving woman taking shape. For now, though, I'd embrace her. She'd be the one getting me through this mess. Let's be honest, this isn't just about catching Jason in a lie anymore. This is about rediscovering myself. So what's next, you ask? Maybe we dive into Mike, a harmless flirtation or more. Or we could follow Jason to whatever love nest he set up with Jessica, get that incriminating photo. So, tell me more about Mike the Mysterious. Beth purred over her second, was it her third, glass of overly sweet white wine. Is he as handsome as he sounds? I took a careful sip, savoring the burn in my throat. Truthfully, Mike was starting to blur into a general concept of attractive man giving me attention. He's nice, funny, and shockingly, not married, I added with a pointed glance at my empty ring finger. Beth cackled. Damn, girl, you are embracing this whole revenge hottie aesthetic. She topped off my glass. Speaking of, how are those little surprises for Jason going? A slow grin spread across my face. Our scheming sessions had become a mix of manic energy and twisted satisfaction. The seeds of doubt were planted, an earring mysteriously discovered on the bathroom floor, definitely not mine. A cryptic lipstick-stained note slipped in his briefcase. Jason had started looking over his shoulder, a skittishness replacing his smug confidence. He deserved every ounce of paranoia. The weekend at the spa with Beth was exactly the kind of ridiculousness I needed. Luxurious facials, terrible reality TV, and a shocking amount of gossip. Amidst the laughter, there was also a moment of vulnerability. Over one too many cucumber cocktails, I spilled the truth. Not about Mike, but about the extent of Jason's betrayal. The hotel bookings the pie had dug up, the proof of their little trysts laid out in brutal detail. Beth, bless her loyal heart, had gone from wicked amusement to spitting nails. That cheating bastard is going down in flames, she declared, her voice a fierce whisper amidst the tranquil spa ambience. Something flickered to life within me. It wasn't just anger anymore, but also a grim sort of determination. Back at home, the act I'd been keeping up for weeks felt different. Before, there was a sense of waiting for the final blow, counting the hours until the inevitable breakdown. Now, I was a woman with a plan, fueled by a strange mix of sorrow and cold-blooded resolve. With each playful text to Mike, each carefully feigned sigh of disappointment for Jason's late nights at the office, I honed my weapon. This wasn't about another man. It was about proving something to Jason, but mostly to myself. There was an odd freedom in giving up on playing the perfect wife. Instead of the usual treadmill routine, the gym became a battlefield. Every pound lifted, every drop of sweat, was an act of defiance. I was rebuilding myself, not for anyone else, but because this broken woman deserved to become someone new. You know that feeling in horror movies right before the big jump scare? Like, the music gets all ominous, the lighting shifts, and you know something's coming even if you don't want it to? That was the vibe in my house all week. Jason was on edge, practically jumping at shadows. His questions about my schedule, once mundane and predictable, now had a nervous undercurrent. Another yoga class. Are you sure you're not, I don't know, taking up karate or something? He joked, but there was no laugh in his eyes. I played dumb, the concerned wife routine perfected through hours of practice. Inside, though, a thrill was building. The hunter, not the hunted, that's who I was becoming. Our anniversary rolled around with all the warmth of a tax audit. Jason presented me with a pair of diamond earrings, absurdly expensive, guilt practically radiating off them in waves. I accepted with a tight smile, already imagining them nestled amongst the evidence I'd collected. Revenge, it seems, looks great accessorized with diamonds. That night, I dressed with meticulous care. My work dinner outfit wasn't a defeated admission of middle-aged complacency. It was powerful, a statement piece, hugging my newly toned body with a confidence I'd forgotten I had. Beth, ever my voice of reason, or unhinged supporter, depending on the day, tried to intervene. Listen, sending cryptic notes is one thing, but this? She gestured towards my sleek pantsuit. This is next-level scheming. I kissed her cheek, a smile playing on my lips. Sweet Beth, sometimes a girl's just gotta go big or go home, right? The hotel, same one Jason frequented with Jessica. I'd memorized the layout, down to the discreet fire exits for that dramatic post-confrontation getaway. Checking into my room, one floor above theirs, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Tension coiled in my gut, but so did a strange giddiness. The next hour was a whirlwind of calculated actions. Room service order meticulously timed, a half-eaten meal arranged to suggest a hasty exit, a single glass of wine with bright red lipstick smeared on the rim. I left the door slightly ajar, the final flourish for the tableau of betrayal about to play out downstairs. A nagging doubt crept in as I sat in the armchair, hidden in the darkness. Was I really ready for this? To witness the culmination of my careful planning, the final, undeniable proof I'd craved? Or was I still that same woman who'd stumbled across a text and let her life unravel? The truth was, I didn't know anymore. Maybe both versions of me existed now, fueled by sorrow and a thirst for justice that tasted like bitter victory. Okay, so maybe I went a bit overboard with the lipstick on the wine glass. But hey, when you're engineering a dramatic showdown, subtlety is not your friend. The note slipped under their door was equally unsubtle, designed for maximum shock value. And as I watched on the tracker app, a twisted satisfaction bloomed in my chest as their littled, ascended to the correct floor. Chaos, thy name is me. Or at least, the new, slightly unhinged me. My carefully timed knock came next, loud and purposeful, followed by my panicked sprint back to the sanctuary of my room. It felt like a lifetime passed, filled with the rapid thudding of my own heart, before the sounds of confrontation filtered through the door. Muffled shouting, Jason's bewildered tone, Jessica's voice high and shrill in denial. There was a crash, a muffled curse, and then the sound that made my stomach clench. A door slamming shut. Phase 2. Enter Mike, my unwitting accomplice. My finger hovered over the send button, a strange hesitation mingling with the thrill of playing this final card. In the end, a desperate sort of recklessness propelled me forward. Maybe I needed someone else to witness the culmination of this mess, a reminder to the shattered woman in the hotel room that there might be life beyond all this. Or maybe it was just about twisting the knife a little more. The wait was excruciating. Each ticking minute ratcheted up the tension, adrenaline coursing through me like a live wire. And then, the knock. Not the hesitant kind, but the pounding, impatient sort that demanded answers. I steeled myself and swung the door open. Surprise! The word hung in the air, a smirk playing on my lips. I'd gone for purposefully disheveled, a messy knot of hair instead of my typical sleek ponytail, the hint of smeared mascara underlining my eyes. Artistry in the service of deception. Jason stood frozen, his expression a mask of shock and the first stirrings of horror. His carefully constructed lies were crumbling in real time, and the satisfaction that surged through me was almost intoxicating. And just when I thought it couldn't possibly get any better. Did I miss something? Mike's voice echoed down the hallway, confused and a little bit amused. The next few minutes are a blur. The shouting match in the cramped hotel corridor, Jessica making a tearful beeline for the elevators, Jason sputtering incoherent excuses. The manager appeared, looking scandalized and probably wondering when this would turn into a pay-per-view event. Beth, ever the true friend, swears she could hear my cackle of bitter victory from 3 counties over. The fallout was messy, and the gossip that swirled around our small town would have been mortifying to the old me. But this woman, the one rebuilding herself in the aftermath of betrayal, she carried it with a defiant tilt of her chin. Packing up and leaving Jason's carefully curated world felt like shedding dead skin. Do I regret any of it? Honestly, sometimes. There are nights when the echo of the shouting match still jolts me awake. But those moments are becoming fewer and farther between. The legalities, the lingering bitterness, the pain of starting over. It all fades a little more each day. I'm not naive enough to think this was a clean ending, a magical fix. But it was an ending, one that I wrote for myself. Isn't that what truly matters? You know those old suitcases with stickers from exotic places, a hint of adventures had and stories to tell? I always figured my life would be more like a sensible carry-on, neatly organized and rolling along a predictable path. Clearly, life had a twisted sense of humor. A year had passed. A year since the hotel showdown, the dramatic exit, the flurry of legalese that finalized the end of a marriage. My new apartment was still sparse, but it was mine. The gym had become a second home, the burn in my muscles a familiar, oddly comforting ache. And as for a social life? Well, the jury was still out on whether blind dates arranged by well-meaning friends were helpful or the 8th circle of hell. Beth, of course, was there through it all. Our nights out had shifted from wine-fueled scheming to messy karaoke marathons. "You're getting over him," she'd declare mid-song, her voice slightly off-key but resolute. "And also, you totally need to work on your high notes." Sometimes, tucked away amidst the laughter, a flicker of doubt would arise. Had I done the right thing? Had all that scheming made me as twisted as Jason? But dwelling in the land of what if was a sucker's game, like driving in reverse with your eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Then there was Mike, his random, "How are you?" Texts had become a sporadic, unwelcome reminder of that night. Initially, they'd brought a bittersweet thrill, a glimpse of that defiant woman I'd briefly been. But now they just annoyed me. Hitting delete felt oddly satisfying. Some tools, after all, are one-time use only. Running into Jason was unavoidable in our small town. He looked diminished, shoulders slumped, the spark of self-satisfaction snuffed out of his eyes. Sometimes, a flicker of pity would stir in me, but I'd stomp it down ruthlessly. He didn't deserve my sympathy, let alone a place in my thoughts. Life, for once, refused to be neatly compartmentalized. Days blurred between challenging, disastrous first dates should earn hazard pay, and surprisingly okay. Beth and I finally mastering our karaoke duet. There were moments when the past threatened to suck me back in, but the urge to simply curl up and quit was lessening. One morning, an unplanned detour took me past a shop with a window display I couldn't ignore. A sleek travel backpack, adorned with colorful stickers from destinations unknown. Something sparked in me, a flicker of possibility. I caught my reflection in the glass. A woman, yes, but not one defined by a broken marriage. There were lines around my eyes, marks of both laughter and tears. There were scars, not all visible, but woven into the fabric of who I was now. I saw a survivor, a woman who had been knocked down and gotten back up again. Maybe it was time to add a few new stickers to my metaphorical suitcase. As I walked away, chin tilted just the slightest bit higher, I knew the adventure wasn't over. It was just beginning. What form it would take, I didn't know, but that was half the thrill, wasn't it? Because now, more than ever, this messy, complicated life